A shift in criminal tactics as artificial intelligence becomes more accessible. There's a rising wave of sophisticated and biometric fraud fueled by deepfakes and AI-driven selfie anomalies. A new report by Sumsub reveals that while traditional fraud like document forgery is declining across Africa, synthetic identity fraud powered by AI is surging. Africa's overall fraud rate fell slightly to 3.42% in Q1 2025, but countries like Tanzania and Nigeria saw increases with synthetic fraud rising by 480% in South Africa and 192% in Nigeria. Kikelomo Shodeko, risk consultant, joins me now for this conversation. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, and I trust you are too. But for the continent of Africa now facing this new shift in criminal tactics, let us into some of the data released and how this could impact Africa.
Basically, we're seeing that shift happening. It's been happening for a while, but because now we have like a concrete report showing that shift in how fraud is being done. So I can tell you that those people that have certifications in CFE, that's the Certified Fraud Examiner, where they are called in as consultants to look at documents that have been forged, and of course they've taught them all the techniques and all that. It seems that they need to now upgrade examining fraud in a different way, because technology is taking over how these things work, and it's not just out of our sphere, but it's also now in Africa. And of course, if we remember correctly, we remember that now we can, there is now new data showing us, at least that was broken out, that some of these criminal organizations, they now situate their organization in African countries. I think that was broken. We saw that information break out on Twitter last week, where the video was hacked, and we saw that they were situated in Nigeria, some were situated in another country, but bouncing off their IP address and making it look like it's Nigeria. So tech is taking over how that is done. And because we don't have our own checks and balances in our borders, it's so easy for these people to just infiltrate.
So they're taking advantage of the lack of regulation, and they're operating in Nigeria, but they're attacking foreign countries. Am I right?
Exactly.
So, right. So
exactly.
Is that what is causing the surge, of these activities within Africa?
That would be part. Yes, that would be part of the pressure that's causing the surge. So on one hand, of course, we have criminal entities in country that are made of Nigerian heritage that are doing those things, but also we have foreign nationals that take advantage of the lack of checks and balances in our borders to take advantage of our spaces, our addresses, and all that, to imitate and pretend to be who they're not.
That's quite interesting. And of course, that's the call to our regulators. We'll get into that in just a moment. But we'd like to see how Africa compares to other regions in terms of this sophisticated fraud or biometric fraud. What's our standing compared to other regions?
So basically, what we're seeing is just like a start. These other places have already had issues with deep fakes, identity fraud. Identity fraud is like one of the biggest crimes, or one of the biggest types of frauds we see, like in the US, for example. So someone can just take over your identity, take over your social security, and is able to access everything you own, from your house to your car to your money. So it's very easy. So identity fraud is not a new thing in other spheres, but it's becoming a new thing here as we expand technologically. Now, unlike before, where you go into the bank with your paper and you have to sign, do a lot of, paperwork. Now it's not the same. You go into the bank, you can just go in. Imagine how easy it is for you to just use your thumbprint, to get your money out of the banks. That wasn't possible years ago in Nigeria, but now it is possible, right? You don't need your card anymore to withdraw money. That is done with just your thumbprint. And when you want to do any transaction, you can just send an email to a bank, and they know what you need, and they have like a secured spot that you can use the OTPs. Do you get what I mean? So that is advanced. So all those advancements in Africa, of course, will attract in itself those kind of situations we have. So that growth we are seeing, when development comes, also comes the disadvantages to development.
Are we even ready for the innovation that we're calling for, and with the rate of innovation? Do we have what it takes to hold that innovation, those are some other questions. I'll still get to you on that. But let's also come to some of the high-risk sectors. What sectors are highly affected or most likely to be affected by this rise in biometric fraud?
Yeah, so basically, the goal of any criminal is to get money, right? It's money. It's money. They need to get money out. Even if they're blackmailing your company or whatever, it is for money's sake. They need the money. They need maybe reputational destruction of that entity, but the core is that they need money. So where is the biggest money central? That is the banks. So the banks will see more of this kind of fraud, ongoing. It will see more of it because that's where the money is at. So they need to take out a lot of money, and so the focus is on the banks and the fintechs. Fintechs are also one of the biggest, they're the biggest unicorns right now. Everybody's putting money in fintechs because they're seeing how they're changing the dynamic of the financial institutions in Nigeria. So this is the core, the biggest people that will be mostly affected are the banks or any entity that carries a lot of money. Thank you.
So fintech, banks, I'm also hearing health tech. It's interesting to see how all this is happening. And how do you see these businesses adapting? Because it's their customers, money, data that is at risk here. So how should businesses, before we come to governments and regulators, how should they adapt this rising wave of fraud?
So if they call themselves one of the fastest growing sector, like basically it's not one of, but like a growing sector, it's very important that they take tech very seriously. They're a sector that uses tech, to bring in more customers. So they also need to use that same tech to reduce the impact on them. So we have different methods in which we can curb fraud in itself. So we have the expert systems where the system, you unleash it and they detect on their own. They can go in deep. You can do the neural style where this works like a brain, all those nodes coming together, making sure that they are linking and basically processing how this fraud might happen and detect it early and things like that. That's why cybersecurity is hot right now, because cybersecurity analysts or cybersecurity experts are the ones that are in these sectors to help banks and any other entity to be able to detect this before it causes more harm. And of course, we have the model base where we figure out how to look at things, detect it based on how the customer uses things and how to detect it early. The signature. Okay, these people have used this kind of system of tactics before. It looks similar. The signature looks similar. So we curb it before it happens. So all these detection processes are already on ground. All it requires, like we say in the field of security, that when you as a security professional, you're begging these companies, use this thing before it causes mayhem. Somebody listen, we're like, no, nothing can happen. They don't want to spend money. The moment it happens, they rush, like headless chicken and quickly want to pump in a lot of money. But hey, it's too late sometimes.
They are learning the hard way. I'm sure they are learning the hard way.
I hope they do.
Yeah, hopefully they don't have to learn the hard way, right? Hopefully they see the risk ahead and, mitigate against it. But let's come to, it's not all doom and gloom. We know that they have won such battles against fraud before, but for example, 80% drop in document forgery, right, in Nigeria. That is what is being reported. What technologies would you say contributed to this success? And perhaps what can we learn from this success to, mitigate the coming and the shifts in fraud?
Okay, I'm sorry to break your heart, but that 80% decrease is because we have to consider the factor that we are not using those physical documents anymore.
Okay.
So as much as we're glad that there is a drop, it's not interesting anymore to do documents when you can do digital, right? So you see, now you don't even have to fill in those forms at the bank anymore. You can do it online. They send you the thing in e-format. You get it all online and all that. So those are the the shift in traditional banking of paperwork is what has led majorly to the reduction. So maybe the document forgery will still be maybe certificates for universities or certificates that you want to present and things like that. That are not those kind of forgery might there will be a drop. But for banking, you can see the move, the huge shift from paperwork to moving to more digital things. So another thing I can let me give them a bit of kudos. I think one of the things they've been able to do is make sure that whatever paperwork is being done is properly monitored, and making sure that they don't have that situation of internal fraud, and reduce it, and of course checks and balances within their bank to reduce that. But on an average, it's mainly because there is a shift in traditional banking.
All right, so nothing much to celebrate there, just the evolution in fraud. We'll come back after this break and talk about how consumers can adapt, how regulators need to adapt to this shift. It's still Business Edge, so stay tuned for more. All right, we're seeing an evolution in fraud tactics here in Africa and all over the world, from the more traditional types to biometric, more sophisticated fraud. And obviously we have been speaking with Kikelomo Shodeko. She has been providing us with quite the perspective, the sectors most affected, and what some of these, the fintechs need to do to adapt. But let's come to the consumers. Is there anything, and thank you for staying with us, is there anything that consumers of these fintechs, health techs, or these high-risk sectors affected by this fraud can do to safeguard themselves?
Yes, I would say that some banks have been proactive, that they reach their customers and let them know that you need a multi-factor. Before it was just two-factor, 2FA. But now it has to be multiple, almost like you have to guard your backyard before anything. So the truth is, yes, it's important to inform the clientele and let them be aware, and the clientele needs to be aware. But let's not forget also that we have different ranges of people that own bank accounts, right? So I think one of the things that we can help those that maybe are less educated is to reduce their activity, their digital activity. So, for example, if normally there are passwords involved, let's reduce that, because most of them might not know how to, So for the educated ones, I don't think there's a disparity between educated and uneducated when it comes to this attacks. But nevertheless, it's important that customers have a multifaceted type of authentication. So whatever it is that you can connect with the bank and tell the bank that, okay, I don't want this. For example, I don't want a password situation. If it's OTP, don't send to this number, send to this number, shut down anything that has to do with cards. I don't want to use cards at all. So if there's any fraud on a card transaction on my account, it will be to your detriment. And I would also say, if customers find themselves in a situation where they feel that the fraudulent activity was done without the bank even making, or any financial institution even making an attempt to help them, I think we should start litigation more often. Put these banks bring them to court, and maybe by then most of them will sit up, to their
right.
Yeah.
So again, they should continue
taking those precautions, as the case may be. Also be ready to take them to court if they don't seem to match what you've been able to do as a precaution on your own self.
Indeed. I just hope that they don't have to continue to learn the hard way. But yes, going beyond two-step verification to multi-step verification now. Let's also come to the regulatory bodies. What role, as you have pointed out, which was very interesting to hear at the beginning, you said some of these fraudsters are leaving their domains across the world and coming to Africa because they can get away with it. And we don't have strong regulation and checks and balances. So what role do you think regulatory bodies can play to help businesses respond to this rapidly evolving digital fraud tactics?
So first and first, I think I'll shade our legislators a bit, and I'll say, rather than focus on trying to clamp down on freedom of speech, these are the aspects they need to consider putting their money on, putting their mouth into, and that is to put up legislation that would criminalize anybody found putting together deep fakes, for example. We see Europe being in the forefront of making sure they're putting regulations in place, because even the US is a bit slow, And, most of the time also, this tech entities, social media platforms and all that, they technicalize the whole thing so much that people don't understand the effect. So let me put into context. Imagine, for example, someone uses a deep fake of a woman or a female and puts her in a X-rated movie or a pornographic movie, right? Immediately that kind of information comes out. There should be a process that criminalizes that act and puts that person that did that behind bars. Like there should be a process. There should be legislation that is strict, that focuses on those types of things. So if you are found doing any type of deep fake or a joke or whatever, it's very important that without consent in place, it must be dealt with immediately. So that's part of what needs to be done. So the legislators need to put up laws, not clamping down on freedom of speech or clamping down on the rule of law or whatever they're planning on doing recently, but focus on legislating anything that tends to want to take away the personal rights of people. You know, it's very, very critical. So they need to legislate in this angle and say deepfakes are not allowed in our country. Look at criminal organizations that are keen on doing this type of thing. Anybody caught using our IP address as a bounce off. Basically have conversations with technical people and not, you know, shrouding it in technical jargon, but
all right, I mean, it looks like there's a bit of a network interruption there, but she was making quite a strong point and pretty much calling out the National Assembly that they need to focus on that type of regulation. Hopefully we see that done, and hopefully we can wrap up this conversation with her. But if that is not the case, I mean, it has been quite a robust conversation. Kikelomo, are you with us now?
Yeah, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So, I mean, you were calling out pretty much, if I'm not mistaken, the National Assembly, that that's the kind of regulation that they need to focus on.
Yes.
How about the other regulatory bodies that we have? What is their role in all of this?
So as long as there is no, you know, the regulatory bodies can't do anything by themselves. If they don't have anything in them that already puts together or allows them take action when there is a fraudulent act. So for example, we were talking recently about Ponzi schemes and how those companies are able to register, for example, right? They register their company, they act as usual, but guess what? Now it's criminalized. But sadly, what the legislation said, you can't get your money back. If your money is gone, it's gone. Yes, we've criminalized, but your money is gone. But you know, so those are the kind of fluctuations that happen at the legislative level. So the bodies we already have right now, the question will be, do they already have that kind of drive or direction to make sure that there is a clamp down on any kind of deep fake fraudulent activity ongoing? Because most of them are still in that document, you know, phase. I might not really have the experts on ground to follow through with that. Yes, I know EFCC, what EFCC focuses on is different from what we're talking about currently. They're talking about, you know, fraudulently getting money or help from anyone abroad or anything like that. But this is using tech to take over someone's identity and bringing in the money. Yes, the EFCC exists to do that, but if you check what they're doing, it does not have that concrete step to actually help when an individual is fraudulently is defrauded in this way that I'm talking about. So if they take the identity of the person and take over the person's account, it's not easy for the FCC to just swoop in. They need that loophole in their laws that allow them to do that before they can even come in. Because they would almost try to figure out which law allows them to go after someone that have done something like this.
I mean, that's indeed a call for stronger legislative, action and backing. And finally, the big question is Africa really ready for all this innovation, digital innovation that we're calling for? How ready is Africa? And these startups, these fintechs, these health techs, are they really prepared as well to, protect the platform, protect the clientele, but at the same time make sure that the experience, they don't compromise on experience and accessibility? Because we're calling for adoption, but are we ready for it?
I would say Africa was born ready, right? There is nothing we can't achieve. If we can provide fintech solutions today that allows people to move their money from point A to point B easily, easier than it was before, then the same way we are ready for this is the same way those checks and balances have to come simultaneously. So I don't think ready is the word. I think it's basically interest to actually do what is needed. For example, I would say that if your money is fraudulently taken from your account in Nigeria, it's very difficult for you to recover it. Sometimes the bank are so mean, they tell you, oh, sorry, it's gone. There's nothing we could do. Why? Because they are allowed to get away with that kind of behavior. But if there are laws, there is a pattern, there are laws in place that safeguards the client. At the end of the day, Nigerians, they use some of these banks as clients, right? So if there is no law safeguarding the clients and their monies, then people will continue to get away with blue murder. That means that all the things that the banks need to do to make sure that whatever the way the person that owns the account uses the account, all those technologies are used to make sure that the person is not defrauded, is part of their job to the clientele. So that's how it has to be. We're not at their mercy as clients. They are at our mercy, is what we desire. So they are ready. It just depends on how intentional they are about making sure that they take care of their clients and keep their clients in place.
Yes,
thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And again, I think legislature that protects consumers as well, I think is also needed so that we can actually take them to court, right? And they learn the hard way. But thank you very much for joining us and providing quite the perspective on the conversation. Kikelomo Shodeko, a risk consultant.